people are expecting. People are expecting quite a bit.
This is your time.
You want to win. You're going to be like this.
There are no shortcuts in life.
You'll get better because you make each other better.
The inches we need are everywhere around us.
I know plenty of people that are capable. I know fewer people that are willing.
You have to believe it to do it.
Now, what are you going to do?
Welcome in, everybody. It is really thrilling today to bring you a simulcast of Sideline Sessions and the Authority podcast here on the B Podcast Network. Really pleased to have a great guest here with me that can speak to the audience of both of these shows so we can get into a variety of topics about his background in coaching, work he's doing more recently in leadership, as well as some topics covered in his book. My guest today is Matt Doherty. Matt is a nationally recognized motivational speaker, best-selling author, media personality, and executive coach. He was a starter on the 1982 national championship team at North Carolina. You might know that team as Michael Jordan was a freshman, I believe, on that team. And he began his leadership journey under legendary coach Dean Smith, then went on to later be head coach at Notre Dame and North Carolina. And in 2001, led the team to the ACC regular season championship and was named AP National Coach of the Year. And actually, as I was prepping this bio today, I realized I probably need to specify that was North Carolina that was the ACC regular season champs, because all of a sudden Notre Dame is in that conference, I realized, right, which they probably could be part of the ACC for 40 years, and I'll never quite wrap my head around it. It's a little different, right? Coach Doherty was also head coach at Florida Atlantic and SMU. He worked at ESPN with the Indiana Pacers and with the Atlantic 10 Conference, and is the author of a book called Rebound, From Pain to Passion. Coach Matt Doherty, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me on the show.
Let's start. I call it a condensed version, although there's a lot packed in there, right, into that bio. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners have known of your work at some of those stops and have some familiarity. Of course, we have folks involved in sports, so they're pretty plugged in. But is there anything, as we're kind of introducing the conversation, as we're talking about the perspective from the work you're doing now, reflecting on all the things I listed off there, that you would kind of add to that, to kind of what that journey has looked like, or the different roles you've moved through?
It's not linear. I give a lot of talks, and one of the slides I put up is a slide. It's a graph, and it shows a steady ascent and then a sharp decline. And I ask people, what does that look like? And most of them say a market crash. And then the next slide, I put the title up top, and it's my coaching career. So I started my coaching career at Davidson College in 1989 under Bob McKillop, the legendary coach at Davidson, best known for, I like to say, being my high school coach, but he's best known for coaching Steph Curry. And then I went to Kansas and was an assistant coach for Roy Williams for 7 years. And then my first head coaching job was at Notre Dame. I started there in 1999. And for an Irish Catholic kid from New York, it was pretty surreal. I thought I'd be there forever. And then a year later, North Carolina came calling after Bill Guthridge resigned. Everyone, including myself, thought Roy Williams was going to take the job. He decided to stay at Kansas. So Dean Smith and Michael Jordan recruited me to come home. That first year, you noted, we had a great season. We were ranked number 1 in the country, beat Duke at Duke, and I was voted, I'd like to say my staff and I were voted coaches of the year. And then the next year I had the worst record in Carolina basketball history, which was 8-20. And then my third year we were rebuilding, starting 3 freshmen and 2 sophomores. My starting center, Sean May, broke his foot, and we won 19 games but didn't make the NCAA tournament. My leadership came under question, and I was asked to leave, and they replaced me with Roy Williams. I took a couple of years off, a little bit of a sabbatical, studied leadership, did some TV, and then wanted to get back to coaching. And that's when I took the job down at FAU. I was there only a year, and then took the job at SMU, which I was there for 6 years, and then got fired. And so, college athletics it's my drug. It's high highs, low lows. And as much as coaches like to be in control, we're often not. And so after that, I looked to get into the NBA. I worked for the Indiana Pacers for about 4 years, went back to college as a administrator in the Atlantic 10 conference, and then ended up being an executive coach. And that's what I do now. So I work with small to mid-sized business owners on leadership, developing systems, driving culture, and been doing that for almost 5 years. And it's really fulfilling work. It is teaching and coaching, and that is my purpose. It's just not coaching basketball players.
I'd love to talk about, we're obviously going to talk a lot about the things you've learned and the wisdom you're going to share with our listeners here. I'd love to start it by talking about the people you learn from and some of the things you learn from them. And we've named some of them so far: Bob McKillop, Dean Smith, Roy Williams, the coaches that you played for and coached with, some of your teammates, Michael Jordan, James Worthy, right? Kenny Smith, Hall of Famers and champions at every level. And I'm sure some of the players you coached, right? Really high caliber people themselves. Who are some of the people you learned the most from, and some of the lessons that have really you've taken with you throughout the years?
Well, I think when I played for Bob McKillop in high school, and I look back, and Bob was 24 years old when I was playing for him. And then the lessons I learned, I was really blessed, Ross, growing up on Long Island, to marry and Walter Doherty, and 3 older sisters, younger brother. And the neat thing about growing up there is you got exposed to a lot of different things. And as a young athlete, I played the sport every season. For every season, we played football, we played hockey, street hockey, we played basketball, we played baseball. And you had all these great coaches that we were blessed. A lot of first generation Long Island. So my dad was from Brooklyn, my mom's from the Bronx. And we had a lot of great coaches. The Coleman brothers coached me in 7th and 8th grade. And the discipline, the lessons, the fundamentals that were instilled in me, the camps I went to on Long Island, had some great coaches there. Was really blessed. And I got a chance to dream, to be able to see the Knicks playing on TV, going to a lot of net games back. The Nets were on Long Island at Nassau Coliseum. That was 5 miles from my house. I got to see Dr. J play. I got to see Dr. J give us a clinic in camp. So I just had so many opportunities to dream and then chase my dreams. There was a park 3 blocks from my house. I call it the park. And Bob McKillop was playing. A lot of the guys, NBA, ABA players, college players. And as a skinny 6th grader, I was trying to get in these games with the college players and the NBA and ABA players. And just really, that was my life. I wanted to be a basketball player, and was afforded the opportunity to, I talk about learn and grow all the time, learn and grow from these players, from these coaches. And I was blessed with height. God gave me, I was 6'7", and I really loved the game. I quit baseball in 6th grade because I read a book by Bill Bradley, who was a legendary Knick, and the book was entitled Life on the Run. And I tell people now that your life's impacted by 3 things: the people you meet, mention all these coaches, right? The books you read, and the trauma in your life. And, the trauma came to me in 2003 when I lost my job at North Carolina. But that book, in Bill Bradley's book, he stated that if somebody else is working on their game more than you, when you two meet, that person would have the advantage. And my dad was a minor league baseball player, and I quit baseball like instantly because I wanted to focus on basketball. I'm all about control what you can control. You can control your attitude. You can control your work ethic. You can control being in shape. I use this term a lot: double knot, like double knot your shoes. because I hate when I see a game and somebody's shoelaces come undone and their shoe comes out and the other team goes down and scores. Like, control what you can control. And so I wanted to control my destiny and be a hard worker, fundamentally sound player, be able to do all the things on a basketball court, pass, handle, and shoot the ball, defend, play hard, be a good teammate, and win. And that's why we won in grammar school, 8th grade Nassau County champs. We won in high school state championships, and we won at college at North Carolina, where we won a national championship in 1982.
How did you, I think, and I'm sure a lot of the folks listening, maybe in an assistant coach role, right? And they are working their way up. They're looking for when their opportunity is potentially to be a head coach. And I'm sure one of the things that might cause friction, right, that to work through in that case is how to be where you are in a sense,
Yeah.
right? How to learn as much as you can in the role where you are, learn from the person who has the job you might want, and especially to work through whatever whatever your feelings are about whether or not that person should be in that job, right? Or sometimes the feeling that I should be there, I should have that role, or when sometimes that means either one, just looking for what are the things that they know that I don't know yet, or what are the things they're able to do that I need to learn how to do. Sometimes it might be learning things that you don't want to do when you're in the position to have that role, right? When you're in that position of authority to say, you know what, I don't like this, and I'm going to really hold on to that. But what did you learn through the different roles you worked through, or even wish that you had paid attention to sooner, right? Things that those great opportunities to learn when you're in those different assistant roles, working for others and kind of evaluating what are the things you want to take for yourself, what are the things that you want to change.
No, I think that there's a lot to unpack there.
Mhm.
I think you have to be curious, be a lifelong learner. You can learn from anybody. You know, you can be scouting a player, high school player, and you see a good out of bounds play or a good drill that a high school coach is running. I got to recruit Mr. Hurley, we called him Bob Hurley, the legendary high school coach at St. Anthony's in Jersey City. And so I was really fortunate to go around and watch a lot of good high school coaches. Some of the best teachers in the game are high school coaches. Bob McKillop was a high school coach. And so really trying to learn and be curious and always ask the question, why? Why are you doing that? What's the carryover from this drill to the game? Scouting, I love to scout. Learned a lot scouting opponents. And so I love watching Bobby Knight's team when at Indiana. When I was at Kansas, I think we played them 6 times, maybe 4. I played against Bobby Knight's teams. And so what is he doing? I watched video clinics where he taught. And so really trying to understand the game. The area that I probably missed out on, there's the art of coaching and the science of coaching. I felt like I was really good with the science of coaching. I think I understood the game. I understood strategy. I understood how to take away the opponent's strengths, attack their strengths on the offensive end. And the thing that I wish I was better at as a younger coach was the art of coaching. And what is that? That's the emotional intelligence. I talk about it today. I was doing a workshop with 2311, the NASCAR team that Michael Jordan owns. And the art of coaching, the emotional intelligence part is more important than the X's and the O's. You could have, I call it the organizational triangle. Every organization has talent at the top, systems, and culture. And I had great systems, I felt. I had some great talent. The culture piece, I drove a culture that was intense, competitive, hardworking. But I think that the emotional connection to the player and understanding that not everyone is wired like me. And when I lost my job, I went on this leadership journey. And one of the first meetings I had was with an executive coach at UVA named Carol Weber. I talk about it in my book, Rebound from Pain to Passion. And she had me do an assessment called the Myers-Briggs assessment. And she gave me the results and told me that I was an ENTJ. And I remember kind of laughing that I've been called a lot of four-letter words before at places like Cameron Indoor Stadium, but never an ENTJ. And she described to me what that was, and that only 2% of the population were ENTJs. And at the time I thought, that's pretty elite. You're 2% of the population. And she quickly noted that, well, that means 98% of the population doesn't think like you think. And so that was a real aha moment for me. I wish I understood that better before I lost my job. I might still be coaching in North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, right? And I think what you, Prince, is perhaps more true now than ever around the importance of coaches really tuning into how they are relating people around them, how they're relating to like athletes or athletes of any age. And the same thing goes all the way up to corporate environments as well, right? That when you are working with people who have options, right, you need to really pay attention to how you are presenting them with the best option, right? How is playing for me, how is working for me advantageous to you? How am I making you better? How am I and that's and of course in the college sports landscape, that's something that I think a lot of people are navigating through right now with the freedom around transferring and those kind of things. And whatever is a better or worse system is kind of a whole separate debate. But the reality is you have to really think of it in those terms and think, look, if why should somebody want to be here and be part of this program if they're not getting better, if they're not learning anything, if they don't see a future for themselves, and if they're not, if I'm not articulating to them a vision of where we're going and why it's compelling, right? And that's something that is just good leadership in any scenario.
Well, I talk about the model that I developed called the 6 Knows, KNOWS, of leadership. And I made up this acronym called STEVIT. And I tell a story that STEVIT was an Eastern European kid that I try to recruit just so it hopefully it sticks, right? Stories stick. I think most good communicators are able to tell stories, and that resonates with people. So STEVIT is the acronym. S is you got to know yourself, because if you don't know yourself, you can't lead others. And then the T is you got to know your team, and not everybody is the same, not only in talent, but how they retain information, how they receive coaching. You can't coach everybody the same. And I think that was a mistake that I probably made. And then you got to know your environment. Like every job is a political web. You know, you have hierarchy, you have athletic directors, you have presidents, you have board of trustees, you have boosters, you have former players. You got to know your environment. And then you touched on the V is vision. Where are you going? Because if you don't know where you're going, how can you expect people to follow you? And then the I is the industry. You've got to know the industry. People are going to follow people that have competence in their industry. And so, and then the last thing, and it's probably the most important, is the truth. You got to know the truth. You got to mine for the truth. And that is an art form in itself, right? How can you get players to give you honest feedback? How can you give your assistants to give you honest feedback? And I wasn't probably great at that. So, you know, if you don't manage the truth will manage you right out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 6 Knows of leadership. And it's something that I try to teach to corporate America.
Yeah, that last one stands out, not only as far as managing the truth and determining how to communicate that, but just as far as the importance of proactive communication. It's something I think and talk a lot about and do a lot around. And that it's the perspective taking piece, the piece of tuning into those around you, those who are part of the organization, thinking about what are the things they'd be interested in knowing, what is going to enable them to feel a higher level of trust about what we're doing here, to understand our vision better so they can make better decisions in the work they're doing and they get better. What are the gaps in awareness that they're going to fill with some other narrative, right? And then you lose control of perhaps what the truth is because, okay, there's nothing to hide here. We're doing the right things, but I haven't engaged people in that. And now they're thinking they must be hiding something or they're making a different assumption, right? And it's a pretty quick way to lose control of an organization.
Yeah, I think every organization needs to have core values. At North Carolina, we had three. We play hard, play smart, play together, right? Those were our core values. You recruit to that, you train to that, and you discipline to that. And my core values are respect, trust, commitment, positivity. And I think that to develop a trust, you've got to show people respect first and foremost. And then the trust is, are you consistent? Are you going to do what you say, even when it's hard? And then commitment, the commitment to getting better, the commitment to your players, the commitment to your staff, a servant leader, which Dean Smith was the epitome of servant leader. And then positivity. I added positivity a few years ago because I don't like being around negative people. Kevin Stallings, who was a great coach at Vanderbilt and a good friend of mine, said there's two kind of players. There's energy givers and energy suckers, right? And there's two kind of staff members, energy givers and energy suckers. And so I want to be around energy givers.
Yeah. I mean, what's the reflexive process around that? I think that, I mean, because it's a great way to divide it up, right? And I think any of us who have been around people who fit into one or the other bucket can recognize it pretty quickly. But I think sometimes people don't recognize it in themselves,
Yeah.
especially if they're being kind of an energy sucker, not necessarily in the sense of being overly negative in an over the top way, right? But in the ways where they are missing those opportunities to give energy and where they're sort of almost magnetically pulling energy out of the equation.
Yeah, it's one thing I learned from an executive coach I worked with when I was coaching at North Carolina, Dr. Jerry Bell. He talked about communication is 50% body language, 35% tone, and only 15% content. So basically, it's what my mother used to say. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? And so, and we control that as a leader, as a coach, as a head coach. I use the phrase, I bring the weather. Okay. So players don't have bad practices, coaches do, right? So how do you show up when you hit the floor? Are you bringing energy to the practice floor? And if you are, then that permeates through the team, right? So I think that's so important. Jack Welch, in his book Straight from the Gut, Jack Welch was the legendary CEO of GE, said that he looks for four things in employees. One, do they bring energy? Two, can they energize others? Three, can they execute? And then four, can they do it with an edge? And when I read that, the first person I thought of was Michael Jordan. So I used that in my evaluation of players when I was a scout for the Pacers. What is energy? Well, when I look at the great players, Michael Jordan, and then I had the pleasure when I was coaching at SMU, we had a great practice facility. So a lot of teams, including the Mavericks and other teams coming in to play the Mavericks would practice in our facility. So I got to watch LeBron James. I got to watch Jason Kidd. I got to watch Dirk Nowitzki, and they loved the game. They loved practice. The practice would be over. They'd be still in the gym playing horse. They had great energy. They engaged with their teammates. They engaged with their coaches. You could see it in their eyes. And I think that that's such an important ingredient that is probably undervalued. When I was working for the Pacers, and I covered the Southeast, but every quarter I'd probably go to Indianapolis and watch the Pacers play. We'd have meetings, and I'd go down to the court, during the early warm-ups, like an hour and a half before the game. And I'd sit with the legendary NBA executive, Donnie Walsh. Donnie and I would sit next to each other, and I just wanted to soak up his wisdom. And Donnie's from the Bronx. Donnie played at North Carolina. And he one day said, you know, it sounds like he sounded like he smoked 10 packs of Camels a day. He had this gruff New York accent. And people from New York call me Matty, right? So I'm sitting next to him on the bench watching guys warm up. And he said, Matty, the most important ingredient in an NBA player. And he paused. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I looked around. I'm like, I'm getting ready to get a nugget here that no one else has. And he said, the most important ingredient in a player is energy. And I'm like, wow, energy. They're playing 82 games a year. They're playing 4 games in a week. They're playing a game the next day. They're getting on a plane. That night, they're getting on a plane to go to another city to play another game the next day. And so to get through that season, they need to have energy.
Yeah, it strikes me as I'm putting together an idea as you're talking, but there's a consistent through line in some of these seemingly disparate elements, servant leadership and having that energy, having that being an energy giver, that positivity, all those things, that there's this necessity of confidence, self-confidence, and I guess to pull another basketball related term into it, having the confidence to trust the process in that sense of saying, like, I am going to really pay close attention to the things that I need to bring to this team or this organization. I'm going to execute on that. I'm going to see it through. I'm going to have the confidence to know that if I'm doing the right thing, the results will come, and I'm not going to be afraid of. In the sense of like servant leadership, there's a humility to that, right? And I have to have the confidence to do that and not to try to have to act important. I need to just serve. Bringing energy to a team is another way of serving, right? I'm not going to be afraid to look dumb or to, right, be the one who's positive when things aren't going well, or who's going to do the dirty work and the little things and the things that don't look cool, so to speak, right? I'm going to just do the right thing that needs to be done and be confident that the results will show. So even though those are totally different kind of things, I think there's a commonality there in knowing who you are, knowing what's the right way to approach your work, and being confident to see it through.
Yeah. And that confidence, as a college player, I tell young people that you have to fill up a bag with half the bag with confidence, and the coach fills it up with the other half. I think in the NBA, it's probably the player has to fill it up like 90% and the coach fills it up 10%. And so that's where we all need encouragers in our lives. And so we need to have I call it a personal board of directors. I stole that from a guy named Bob Bodine. And, who are your personal board of directors? And on our personal board of directors, we need encouragers. We need cheerleaders. We need people that support you, but we also need truth tellers, right? So someone says, oh yeah, I think you could play in the NBA, but maybe you're not capable of it. So, I think that's the balance, right? I want to encourage you to chase your dreams, but also you're 5'2", non-athletic post player, probably not going to make it in the NBA. So how can you encourage people? Doesn't mean you can't enjoy the game and be the best you can become. The other thing you touched on is confidence. You talk about the people you surround yourself with. The person that you're around the most is yourself. And one thing that I think is the positive self-talk that we need to give ourselves. I do a podcast myself, and I interview people, and I asked a lot of the times, what's your morning routine? And a lot of successful people do 3 things. They pray, they journal, and they exercise. And I jokingly say, I'll do 2 of the 3. I don't exercise in the morning. But I was never a good journaler. I think partly because I probably have some ADD, where I'd look at a blank piece of paper and try to write my thoughts and I get distracted. So I've used this journal called the 5 Minute Journal, and it prompts you with questions every morning, and I do it at night. And so what would make today a great day? What affirmations, what are you telling yourself? And then again, I'll talk about books. I read more now than I ever did in college. And this one book called Soundtracks, it's about this public speaker, and he did a morning anthem. And it was basically 10 affirmations that I do every morning. And one of them is, I'm the CEO of me. Another one is, everything always works out. Another one is, momentum is messy. And I said that to myself during the day today. Momentum is messy because success isn't linear.
Right.
If you're trying to do something special, you will face adversity. You will face setbacks. You will face failure. Again, I was talking to the race team at 2311, and you could have a great year and not win a race, and if you may win one or two races. It's like a baseball player. You bat 333 and you go to the Hall of Fame, but that means you're striking out over 6 times or not getting on base over 6 times a game. So can you deal with that kind of adversity and that kind of failure? And you can improve that. Some people aren't naturally wired to that. And so I think, but you can improve it. And you can improve that resiliency. You can improve that mental toughness. And a lot of it is what you're saying to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's people are going to have to listen. They're going to have to visualize this in their own head. But as far as success not being linear, in one sense, it is quite literally a curve. It's kind of a bell curve, right? That at the one end, if you're really not good at something, you're going to fail a lot. But at the other end, the better you are, the more you're going to fail because you're going to be operating at a higher level, going against better competition, pursuing more harder to attain jobs, right? Operating in a lot of pressure, and a lot of failure is going to come with that, right? You mentioned the baseball player. Okay, if you have no ability at all and you're playing at a low level, you're going to struggle. As you move up, maybe you're a really good high school player, you're succeeding all the time. If you're good enough to go professional, then you could still be one of the best pros, but you're going to lose more than you win. Same thing with coaching. And that takes us to another great teacher, adversity, right? And it's unavoidable. And rebound is the name of your book. It's not just a basketball term, it also refers to bouncing back from struggles and totally applies. It doesn't make it any easier in the moment. It doesn't mean that you necessarily welcome the tough times as they are happening, but there's opportunities to learn later. And there's like the few questions I think that are helpful to frame this around. It's like the what went wrong, why did this happen, how do you prepare for your next opportunity, which I think are core to the book. But what I guess, yeah, like you've written the book about it, right? So like how have you developed your perspective around what adversity means and should mean and what people should learn to make it mean in their lives?
I think perspective is a good word. When I was coaching, I had a friend who was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he gave me a challenge coin, and I carry it with me every day. And when I was coaching at North Carolina, we were playing at Maryland my last year. We lost by 50 points on the road, worst loss in Carolina basketball history. And I remember reaching in my pocket and flipping the coin around and saying, you know what, it could be worse. I could be in Afghanistan. Today, a couple things didn't go my way. And I said to myself, it could be worse. I could be caught in the fires in LA. I have a dear friend who's struggling with cancer and may not, live very long. It can always be worse. And one of my clients one time told me, we have a tendency to compare up. And with social media, it makes it that much easier. We see these people living this life that we want to live or feel we deserve to live, but we very rarely compare down to the people that are struggling, the people that are begging for food, the people that have it worse off than us. And I think we need perspective in our lives to have a healthier mindset.
Yeah, kind of some of the coaching, like performance coaching work that I've done. We refer to that as judging circumstances. There's judging yourself, but which is typically people who are really hard on themselves and they think they're not good enough. There's judging others, which is having harsh perspectives toward others, and then judging circumstances, which is that comparison and that taking a partial story of something that seems this person's doing better than I am, they seem to be succeeding, they whatever the case may be, and now it's making me feel differently about myself instead of focusing on what are my actual goals. And a lot of times, like you mentioned with social media, the internet, the media in general, looking at trying to interpret other people.
Yeah, I think that's one of
that
the hardest
person's
things
succeeding
about
in a
me.
way that you don't even care about.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
doing
and-
well
and-
at something that I don't even want to do, and yet because I'm paying attention to them instead of me, it's changing my attitude.
And they might not even be succeeding. It just looks that way. Like I like to say, don't compare your everyday to someone's highlight film. And so a lot of people that look successful are out probably maybe living in turmoil, inner turmoil. So I think that that perspective is healthy. And I also think that when you deal with adversity, God doesn't promise us a smooth path. He promises us hardship. And it forces us to lean on him. You get brought to your knees. Well, should you do when you're on your knees? You should pray. And so I think that one thing that helped me was bring me closer to God to realize, okay, God, why? All right, how do you want to use me? How do you want to use my talents? And so you talked earlier about vision and mission. Well, my mission statement is to make a positive impact on the people I meet and the groups I work with while dropping breadcrumbs to the Lord. Okay. So I feel like, all right, God, you put me in this situation. I'm not coaching basketball, but I still have an impact on people, and maybe more so as an executive coach, because if I'm doing a good job, that flows from them through their organization. And then doing shows like this and writing a book, hopefully that when I get to heaven, God will say, well done, my son, right? And so that's my bigger goal. But we can all lose sight of it because we get caught up in, oh, look at that guy, he has a nice car. Look at that guy, he has a big house. Look at that guy, he's a member of this country club. So again, comparing down and running your own race, putting blinders on, it's hard to do because we're humans, right? And we're flawed. We're all flawed.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, because I think this relates to things that you can learn about yourself and about your life in reflecting on adversity. It also can relate to things that are happening in your circumstances, as far as you reference leadership positions, coaching positions in large institutions. There's inherently a political element to them, and there's people who are your biggest supporters, and they're the ones who wanted you in the role. There's always going to be other people who disagree with, and there's parts of determining what is the playing field, what's the knowledge that I can act on and do something about, and what are the other things that if there's nothing for me to do about it, I need to let it go, right? And I think there's part of that in the reflection on adversity, that I'm sure there are things that you look back on and say, I would have done that differently. I would have made a different decision. I would have been better at this or that. And there's probably other things that, you know what, to the best of my reckoning with, this thing went poorly because of a decision somebody else made or something that I disagree with in some other circumstance. And the best thing I can do is just accept that and move on. And I can't do anything about it, right? And I can't change. But there's an element of needing to be able to understand the difference, I would think.
You just described the serenity prayer, right? God, give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right.
Right. I pray that every morning. And so I think that, hopefully that gives me some peace. I tried to get back to coaching a few times and wasn't granted the opportunities. And I remember one time I got a text from an athletic director at a lower level school in the state of North Carolina that I thought I should have gotten. And he told me in a text that he's going in a different direction. And I wheeled around out of my bed, got on my knees, and, basically thanked God that, for closing a door. Like sometimes you got to trust the closed door. And that's hard, especially for someone that's driven, competitive, wants to win. And sometimes God's closing a door and you don't know why, but maybe you come to a realization later on in life that, you know what, I'm glad I didn't get that opportunity. So dealing with those setbacks, we are not as in control as we think we are. And so I think that, again, giving that and accepting some of that gives us an inner peace that I know I can struggle with at times. And so, again, that's why I like to think I'm drawn closer to God. And then when we have some success, what happens is we kind of forget, right? That maybe that wasn't all us. Maybe our higher power had something to do with that. And I believe that.
Yeah, yeah, it's right. The challenge of continuously being mindful, reflecting, and saying whether I'm having success or not, it's never all me. It's never not me at all. And I need to know what's my role in this and what are the things that I need to appreciate. And to your point, almost if you don't get a job you want or whatever the case may be, it's like having the mentality of I really wanted it, so I wish that they wanted me. But if they didn't want me, then I shouldn't be there, right? Like it
Well,
might
you
have
look,
been
as
that
you
they,
talk,
yeah,
as you talk, it makes me think of Steph Curry. Steph Curry's dad played at Virginia Tech. Steph Curry, I remember seeing him in high school. He was small, slight, wasn't a high flyer, and he goes to Davidson. If he went to an ACC school, he may never have gotten the opportunity. His first game, I think he had 13 turnovers, and Bob McKillop kept encouraging him. And so through that, he was able to work through some poor play and still had the confidence and the opportunity to play through those mistakes. Whereas he was at a bigger school and he had those mistakes, he might have been buried on the bench. So the fact that he didn't get the opportunity to play in the ACC gave him an opportunity to flourish at Davidson. So, God works in mysterious ways.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's full circle, right? Because you have to, once you have the opportunity that you do have, whether it's the one that you thought you wanted, then you have to make that a good opportunity and make the
Yeah, you got to
most of
make the
it.
most of where you are. And that goes back to your comments earlier for assistant coaches. They may not be in the job they have, but make that the best, better opportunity. Make that a better situation, and people will recognize that. Again, I look back at Mr. Hurley at St. Anthony's. He had opportunities to go to different, take some college jobs, and he stayed at St. Anthony's and ended up in the Hall of Fame. Bob McKillop had opportunities to leave Davidson, stayed at Davidson, won over 500 games, a Hall of Fame coach. So if he would have gone somewhere else, would he have had that kind of success? Who knows? And so make the situation you're in better, and don't always have your eye on another job. Because if you do your job, then you'll get rewarded in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. What do you think makes that hard? Is it human nature? Is it
Yeah.
society? Because it is true and it's also difficult.
Yeah, I think it's human nature. We always want more, the disease of more. We want bigger, we want better. But I think if you have a piece about you, a confidence and knowing who you are, go back to the self-awareness, the grass isn't always greener. And if you know who you are, and fit is so important. So I go back to Bob McKillop at Davidson, that fit him. And, I've seen coaches go to another job and maybe it's a bigger job, but it's not a fit for who they are. And I think that you really have to know who you are and then find a match. And then you'll have fulfillment. Bob was never the highest paid coach in the country, wasn't even the highest paid coach in the Atlantic 10, but he had a lot of fulfillment. He worked with great kids at a great institution, lived across the street, got to coach his two boys. His daughter went to school at Davidson. and, has been in the same house for about 35 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how in some parts of life, I think the concepts can feel a little easier and other times challenging, but it certainly relates to leadership in organizations, and something that I talk to people about around hiring in particular, right? And to me, it's like choosing the right person for the job if you're going to be their supervisor
Yeah.
is, I don't know,
Choosing the right.
20% of the job. That might be an underestimate, but the biggest part of it is, what are you going to do once you hire them? How are you going to prepare them for success? How are you going to support them? If you just have the mentality of, all right, I picked you, now you'll either succeed or fail, then you're going to see a lot of failure. The same thing, I noticed this when especially as I was coming of age to get married, and a lot of friends and peers were not super close to it. And the thing I noticed about the anxieties around it, and this is like particular to men, right, was the reason you're afraid of this is because you're just removing all of your own agency and responsibility. And you're just worried to get married to this person, and I don't know if they're going to make me happy. I don't know if they're going to make this. And it's not, instead of thinking, what are you going to do to make it a great relationship, right? What are you going to bring to it? How are you going to be responsible for it? And then, like, again and again, it was that piece of, what am I doing to turn my circumstances and my opportunities into great outcomes? And am I just worried about what somebody else is going to do, or thinking that it's all about what's done to me versus what I can do about it?
Right.
That's right. You take the initiative. So a lot of that is about fit, right? Whether it's a spouse, a job, it's about fit and aligning with, again, your values and the values of that other person or that other institution.
Amazing. Well, we're getting close to the end of the conversation, and I guess I wanted to tie it together by revisiting. I think this is a good final kind of thought for our listeners. This concept of leadership as a learned behavior, right? And you write about, I believe, kind of having an introduction into a lot of this even after your coaching career. And I think one of the things it illustrated was your interest in continuing to learn more and learn about leadership even after you would have, I'm sure you very easily could have continued to get professional opportunities and get into executive coaching and keynoting and the various things you've done by just coasting off of everything you had already done, right? But you had an interest in continuing to learn more. And I guess that's the thing that I would be interested in leaving our listeners with, is how would you advise or encourage them, regardless of where they are right now, how much they're succeeding, to continue pursuing more, and to this point of leadership as a learned behavior, that there's always more to learn, right, about being a great leader, being a leader in different environments.
Yeah. Well, when I got let go at North Carolina, my leadership was questioned. And at that point, I felt like you're either a born leader or you're not. And with my leadership coming under scrutiny, I was told I wasn't a good leader. And so I went on a leadership journey to learn more. It's like I think as a coach or a player, I think there's so many transferable skills to life and business, and having a background in sports. And one of the things that you do after a game, win or lose, is watch the film and learn from it, right? So I wanted to watch the film of my coaching career and what could I have done better. And so I went on this leadership journey, and I remember taking a class at Wharton, and it was just an executive class. And the first day, the instructor, Fran Johnston, was teaching out of the book, Primal Leadership, The Art of Emotional Intelligence. And in the book was a sentence that leadership is a learned behavior. And it was the most exciting thing I ever read. Why? Because I was told that I wasn't a good leader. And now I realized I can become a good leader. And so, and that was really powerful for me. And so again, I wanted to look back and say, all right, I lost the game. I lost my job. What could I have done differently? And it's just like you lose a basketball game. You're like, okay, we should have played more zone. Okay, we should have subbed more. Okay, we need to work on our foul shooting. What can we fix to get better? And that's what I did. And now I wrote that book, Rebound, and I want to help people avoid the landmines I stepped on. And I think that's my purpose. My purpose is to teach and coach. Again, it's just, I think we all need to find our purpose. What is our purpose in life? And when you find that and you can sync it up with a career, that's very fulfilling. And so I think to remain curious, always ask why. And again, I go back to your life's impacted by three things: the people you meet, who are you hanging out with, who are you learning from, and then what books are you reading, what podcasts are you listening to, and then the trauma. The trauma is coming whether you like it or not. And I recommend some self-induced trauma. What is that? How do you get that? Through assessments. I give my clients 360-degree assessments. I had it done after I lost my job at North Carolina, and I learned some things where it's confidential input from people you work with. When you read something in an assessment that states that you handled situations in a certain manner that wasn't so flattering, that sticks with you. That's trauma. That's self-induced trauma. And that's mining for the truth. Again, if you don't mine for the truth will, if you manage the truth will manage you right out the door. So I want to get ahead of that and ride it like a wave as opposed to being on the shore and getting crushed by the wave. So continually to learn. My motto is to learn and grow, continuous learning and growing. And leadership is a practice. And what do I mean by that? I didn't understand until about 3 or 4 years ago when I started as an executive coach that, doctors would say, I have a medical practice. Lawyers would have a legal practice. Dentists would have a dental practice. And I used to joke saying, Doc, I don't want you practicing on me. When you get good enough to operate on me, you can operate on me. But why is it a practice? Because it's skills. Those are skills. Doctors have skills. They have to cut people open. They have to find things in your body. Dentists have to extract teeth, create teeth, bridge your teeth. Lawyers, there's constant new laws. There's things coming out, new cases, and they have to stay up to date and practice. Well, leadership's a practice. You are not going to be perfect. You're going to make a mistake. And I use an analogy of, it's like getting in the red zone in football. You're inside the 20 getting ready to score, and then somebody pushes a button and extends the field 100 yards. That's leadership. And so you got to practice, and you will fumble. And when you do, watch the film and get better and try to avoid that fumble in the future.
Amazing. Well, we'll put the links below, listeners, to website, you can learn about his work, his book there. Anything in particular you'd like people to check out?
Yeah, they go to my website. It's dohertycoaching.com. That's DOHERTY coaching.com. And they can I do keynote talks, executive coaching, and workshops. So yeah, go there and you can get all the information you need.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, this episode, as it'll be appearing in a couple different places, whether you're out there coming from the sports world or in school leadership or leadership in other organizations, we'll make the links easy to find so you can follow through on the resources and information that are helpful to you. Please also do subscribe to Sideline Sessions and The Authority, depending on where you're listening. If you find this conversation valuable, I'm sure you'll find more episodes that are helpful to you, or you can visit bpodcast.network to learn about more shows in the education field. Coach Matt Doherty, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on the show.
This episode was edited by Gage Sanderson.